Hot Topics with City Manager Eric Tungate. Elevate Oak Park.
Good afternoon, City Manager Tungate, and thank you for joining me on your show, Meeting with the Manager. I know typically you would be the one in this seat asking the questions, but we're doing things a little differently today because you are the expert on hand as to what we're going to be talking about, and that is the Elevate Oak Park project and the two ballot proposals that our residents will be seeing on the November 7th ballot. So Elevate Oak Park, that is something that we've been talking about for well over a year now. So when you hear Elevate Oak Park, what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, I think you very well said that it's been a journey. I've been here for over a decade now, and throughout the course of that time that I've been here, I've recognized this need to really take our community to new heights and to the next level, and that's what it means to me. Is enhancing quality of life amenities and public service options and community assets throughout the community in our parks, our community center, and some of our city facilities existing to really bring our city to a level that we feel that our residents are deserving of.
And how do you think increased parks and recreation opportunities will be able to do that?
Well, because I think that's the missing ingredient. As we're sort of playing chefs, if you will, with the city, we're looking at all of the various aspects to a successful, thriving, vibrant city. And the missing ingredient at this point, in my estimation, really is a lesser availability of adequate parks and recreation facilities and amenities. And we're a city of parks, and if you just take our community center and look at what it has to offer and what it doesn't have to offer, it's lacking. I mean, in comparative terms, especially when you look at other cities in the metropolitan area. So this really is the missing ingredient, and we need this, I think, to attract new residents, increase taxable values to continue this momentum the way we've seen, and really attract new businesses, because we recognize that quality of life is the number one thing, a good quality of life, the number one thing for getting us to that next stage of things. And with that comes some expectations. And like I said, so much of it goes back to parks and recreation facilities and amenities.
So in order to fund new parks and recreation facilities and opportunities, I know that the city has already started to apply for grants to receive some funding. We are looking to receive donations through certain campaigns, and we've also earmarked some funds in our general fund to move forward, for example, with the event hub. But there will also need to be additional funding to really bring to life what our residents and our city officials have envisioned as our new parks and recreation opportunities. On Monday night, City Council unanimously approved putting two ballot proposals on the November 7th ballot. Can you talk a little bit about those and what our residents can expect to see on the ballot?
Sure, and let me just digress a little bit and say that, the expectations our residents have of us is that not only are we going to have a frugal city government, one that's running efficiently and maintaining a proper rainy day fund of about 20% set aside, and that's to protect against the unexpected. But we also, at the same time, then have to look at new ways and creative ways in some cases to find new money to do some of the things we're talking about. I would say, I've been in government now for going on 20 years, and I would say I have never witnessed a more aggressive grant application team than we have here. So if there's a grant out there through ARPA funds or state funds or county funds, whatever it may be, we are at the table asking for it on behalf of our residents. Then we also have to, I think, look at a dedicated funding source, and really, there's really no other way to do it in this realm of government than to go directly to the voters and say, hey, we need a millage in place in order to have a dedicated funding source that we can count on in order to fund this thing year over year. I don't think anyone goes into any of this thinking that things are going to just happen magically and things are for free. But I think the expectation that things are run efficiently, that their tax dollars are being used wisely, I think those are all fair and accurate estimates of what should be expected of us and the things that we should demand of ourselves, and we do.
Very nice. And so the two ballot proposals, there is a Headley override that will be on the ballot in November, and then there is also a general obligation bond proposal. Can you talk a little bit about what each one of those means and how they also kind of interact with one another?
Sure. The Headley override will allow us to fund certain capital improvements, and just one example would be to help us fund our event hub space, which is the space right next to City Hall. In between City Hall and our library, we have a green space currently that's not being used. So that will go a long ways to initially helping us fund some of the capital improvement costs associated with that. As we go forward and the event hub is then built, that'll help us fund perhaps some capital improvements throughout our parks, the rest of our parks, also some of our operating costs related to Parks and Recreation. The 4 mil levy, and this is for the $40 million debt service in the way of capital improvements, will be almost entirely allocated for a new community center close in proximity geographically to where the one is today. So very unique in the sense that we need one for the other because we need the operating monies to be able to then operate our community center should that pass. But if we don't get both, if we just get the Headley override and not the debt service for the new community center, then we'll look at other ways to invest throughout the parks systems.
So if the general obligation bond passes, essentially the 2.4 mil Headley override needs to pass as well to fund staffing of a future community center, because I know what we've looked at in terms of creating a new community center will be able to provide additional programs and have additional space, and we will need additional staffing to man that.
Well, there's no doubt about it. So let's presume for a moment that the debt service passes but the Headley override doesn't, which is a possibility. It's up to our voters. Then in order to build and operate the community center in that scenario, we'd have to look at even more creative ways to find additional operating funds to do so. And for those that think, just raise the membership fees and things like this, it's not possible. Public pools, public recreation centers, public community centers do not pay for themselves. It's just not the way it works. There does have to be some kind of a subsidy in place. And in this case, it's not going to be possible to do that entirely with raising revenues from membership fees. So we do need that dedicated source of revenue in addition to be able to run it the way that we think we need to.
According to public tax information, Oak Park ranks 10 out of 11 when looking at the additional tax millages that other communities in Oakland County have. So to me, that highlights that we have not necessarily put recreation funding as a top priority. Obviously, we have a 0.4 millage to support some of our operating costs right now, and then we have general fund dollars. But I believe, and let me pull out the exact information, we spend $38.71 per capita on recreation, while some of our neighbors spend up to $360 per capita. So can you talk a little bit about that and how our priorities are starting to shift?
Absolutely. The numbers don't lie. I mean, I think, you look at those average, and, the comparative communities that we used are all in the southeast Oakland area for the most part. So our neighboring cities, for example, provide way more funding for Parks and Recreation than we do, which really, I think of all the things to come out of the pandemic, one of the things was that it really shone a light on our lack of funding for this effort. And people, these are the spaces people are using, and these are the things people are doing, and it's become part of the fabric of these communities. So it really just underscores how lackluster our funding for this has been. And again, in so many ways, and I have to say this and digress again, people think that the only role of government should be to frugally manage the very basic services. Well, yes, that's true, but we also have to be able to steer the city in a direction where we're the champions of the highest and best quality of life amenities available out there, so families can succeed and have a park to play in and a community center to learn how to swim and these kinds of things. So that's what we're doing. We're taking on that additional responsibility, but in order to do so adequately to meet the needs of our community, of course, we have to, as I said, we have to raise the dollars to do it.
And is it true that if both of the ballot proposals pass, that we still wouldn't have the highest per capita spending on parks out of the 11 communities that we looked at?
Not even close. We still would be nowhere near the top. And you know, there's some wiggle room here. But again, I think the communities that have prioritized parks and recreation, and actually I think one of the best examples, which is not in the examples you just provided, but is the city of Detroit. The public parks amenities, the Riverwalk, Campus Martius Park, the DeQuinder Cut, the Joe Louis Greenway, all of these various things that have been built really in the last few years are some of the most successful economic development engines in the city, in the entire city now. I know the Campus Martius Park has been named the top public square in America by USA Today. The Riverwalk is a few years running as the top Riverwalk in America. And it really just shows you that those public investments have now paid off. They've led to new development and new activity and restaurants and, you know, you name it, around the park, around these amenities. Well, we have great spaces here. We just don't have the facilities and the programming to meet the needs. So, you know, in so many ways, this is an acknowledgement of that, and of course, giving us the tools to take it to the next level.
And speaking of meeting the needs, so I know that we referenced earlier how last year at this time we were going through our Parks and Recreation Master Plan update, and with that came an extensive engagement process. So we held town halls, we had online forums, we did social media campaigns. You know, we really went out to the public and we wanted to hear what their priorities were for Parks and Recreation for the City of Oak Park moving forward. So how would you say the millages that are on the ballot in November are reflective or relate to what our residents said during our Parks and Recreation engagement process?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. You know, the millages, the two proposals mirror almost exactly what we heard during that year-plus long tour of duty, if you will, where we heard very succinctly from a pretty wide array of community members about what they wanted. So, you know, obviously our job here as stewards of the city government where residents pay taxes is to reflect their needs, wants, and desires. And so we're doing that, not just with the millage and proposal requests, but also with the kinds of recreation resources and amenities that we're targeting. You know, a swimming pool, for example, was the #1 thing that came out of that year-long process. Basketball courts, a new community center, those are all some of the top things to come out of that. So we tried to model it, as I said, directly. So, you know, that's our job, and we stick to it. So,
Since November is not too far away, and both of these ballot proposals, you know, there's information that needs to be understood. How do you, or would you like to talk a little bit about how we're going to help bring that information to our residents so they feel that they're fully educated when going to the polls?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think we do best here in Oak Park is we provide all of the information, all of the data. We go out of our way and then some to make sure that anyone who wants to be engaged or involved can be. And so, like with all of the proposals throughout the time that I've been here, especially, we're going to have town halls, we're going to have information sessions at block clubs, magazine articles, you know, you name it. And actually, you're going to be spearheading many of these initiatives as you put the planning together for this. But I don't want anyone to walk into a polling booth in November and not understand what they're seeing. If they want to know the answers, the resources are going to be available. You know, I'm going to be personally out and about giving as much information and data as I can. Obviously, we're precluded in this administrative capacity from soliciting a certain position, yes or no, but we just want to make sure people are informed and know what they're voting for.
Very nice. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I'm excited about it. I think of all the changes in this community, and you know, and I can only speak to my tenure because it's what I know, but you know, to me, this is perhaps the most substantial potentially, just because you know so much of this is physical capital improvements that people can interact with and see, and it's exciting. I think our community is craving these changes, quite honestly. And should they pass, I think it's going to be an exciting time to see what can be done and the transformation that can occur.
Very nice. Well, I'm excited to help elevate Oak Park.
Thank you.
Thank you.